Hi, welcome everyone. Thanks for attending. Is it not? Okay. Okay, awesome. Hi there, welcome everyone. Thanks for attending this session. I know Decoupled Drupal has been a hot topic, and there've been a lot of sessions around it. This is again a beginner level introduction, so hopefully there'll be some takeaways for everyone. I'm the Director of Technical Architecture at IQ Solutions, and just a little bit about IQ Solutions. We're a health and just speak a little louder. Okay. Sorry, I don't do this on a daily basis, so. But we are a health and a communications company. We have a very strong IT team. We have a lot of subject matter experience on health and education and communication. These are some of the services we provide. We're a full service shop, and we do social media, digital strategy, content strategy, a lot of mobile website application development. In terms of IT, we do Drupal. We have a big .NET, big Java. We pretty much do all of that. We do a lot of cloud work. These are some of our clients. We work with the NIH, CDC, SAMHSA, AARP, FDA, a whole bunch of clients. We're based out here in the DMV. So today, I'll get started now with what is decoupled. What are we really talking about? Decoupled can mean many different things in many different systems, but in the whole Drupal space, we're trying to separate the presentation layer of the CMS from the actual backend, and the backend just becomes an API, a content hub. We all know Drupal has a very strong data model. It provides you content types, entities, and relationships, taxonomies. It's very flexible, highly extensible. We all love working with it, and it's very stable and well supported. It's extensible in the sense that it's got pretty much everything you need. There would be no reason to decouple it. It's got a huge, large ecosystem of contributed modules, an extensive caching layer built right into it. Now with Drupal 8, even better, and then all the reverse proxying technologies like Vanish, that help it become even faster. So it's really great in that sense. I think where we feel the need for kind of decoupling is it is kind of monolithic in architecture, and you got to do things the Drupal way, and everything is closely tied server side, and of course you can pretty much do anything, but it's this monolithic architecture that kind of wants you to break out of it. The need to so if you're doing complex UI interfaces, and Drupal 7 and 8 come out of the box with jQuery and JavaScript, and so you're limited to that, and your ability to build complex UI interfaces gets harder, and this kind of actually elevates the need for us to have to decouple it. Not all front-end developers or consumers of this data need to know of Drupal. It's also a good separation of concerns. You have your front end. Separate from it could be a mobile application. It could be any other application, a microsite, a blog that needs your data, and any third-party site. So you're kind of separating that whole thing. It can be scalable in some cases. We'll go through some of those instances, and can also be a lot more cost-effective. So the web is all about experiences today. You get improved user experience, improved performance and speed. There are no page postbacks. More responsive UI. All the UI we see out there is now has autocompletes. Validations of all kinds, all happening on the client side. And a lot of this can be achieved, working within the whole Drupal ecosystem, but it's gotten a lot more effective with all the advancements in the front end to start decoupling this and making use of the latest JavaScript technologies out there. Things like sliders, charts, geomaps, date range selectors. We'll see some of these examples. On the server side, the data gets made available everywhere. It's more reusable. And we've also kind of, we've come from a legacy of different sites. We have, some of our clients are on Drupal 7, and they want to upgrade to 8. And this kind of decouple approach has also helped us in that sense. We developed very complex interfaces, and we want to move to another version of Drupal. It just kind of makes it easier. And also scalability can be improved. The techniques out here that we will discuss. There's been over the past 5 or 6 years, even more. The innovations on the front end have been so great. Every year we have a new ECMAScript standard. What that really, ECMAScript is a body that defines what the new JavaScript is going to look like. And there's been tremendous changes every year. And there have been a lot of new modern frameworks and libraries like React, Vue.js, and Angular. And so to use these, it's better in a decoupled approach. It's more, the new JavaScript is object-oriented, and I put a thing out here about developer experience. And we had developers who didn't want to work with JavaScript on the front end because it's just not maintainable. It's hard. You have server-side developers and they just want to stay on the server side. They don't want to come on the front end. And now with all these advances, we've kind of closed that gap. Developers love the experience that they have, and that just boosts productivity, and you get much better applications all around. So, obviously to use modern JavaScript, all these standards that come up every year, the browsers don't understand that standard. They still work with the older version of ES5. So, you got to learn technologies, you got to transpile this. I put a slide out here about Babel and Webpack. Babel is a plugin that works within Webpack, and it transpiles JavaScript, which is the latest standard JavaScript, into JavaScript that the browsers understand. So you have to kind of learn this technology to start using this modern JavaScript. I missed one slide. I think I lost a slide out here. I do apologize. Let's get that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we talked about this. Yeah. So modern JavaScript looks like this. It's very class-like. Object-oriented. It has a module system out there. It looks very much like server-side code, and it's great to work with. Some of the problems with this obviously are there's so many frameworks to choose from, and they keep changing. Every day there's a change. And unless you use ES6 or TypeScript, writing good JavaScript can be hard. There are many build systems out there, like Webpack, Create React App, Parcel.js. Some of these actually abstract the complexities of Webpack and make it easier. But this is kind of like, these are some of the barriers that you're going to face if you want to move into the decoupled space. And this is more on the client side of things. And on the server side, it's kind of a different set of challenges that you have. So if you want to start decoupling, within your team, you need good, strong experience with selecting a good JavaScript framework and having good experience with it is important. And so you have to go through that whole maze. And some of those slides that I presented has a couple of options of some of the frameworks out there, and you probably want to look at that. The other part of it is exposing your data, and that is kind of like your data layer. How do you want to expose it? And we're going to talk about like 3 competing standards out here: REST, JSON API, and GraphQL on the back end. And they're good modules on the back on Drupal for this. They're all pretty good, but they all have different use cases. So. But to achieve decoupling, you got to figure out what you want to use. You'll keep. I'm going to just throw out a couple of terms out there because as you get into the whole decoupling space, you're going to keep hearing about these things. I don't know if they matter too much, but it's good to have a good understanding of what is what. Coupled, of course, we know is everything. The presentation layer and the Drupal backend is all connected. You're using Drupal as with its own templating engine. In a progressively decoupled, this is what we see most of the traction, at least happening right now, is you have your presentation layer, but you have these mini JavaScript applications that live in the presentation layer, and they're called single-page applications. They live within Drupal, or they could live outside, but mainly they live within Drupal because in the whole routing system, because you want to make use of that, the Drupal backend. So they're kind of connected, and this is called the progressively decoupled space. And then we talk about fully decoupled. What that is essentially you're separating your presentation, and that's called going completely headless. Drupal has just become an API layer at that point, and that's essentially fully decoupled. So some more terms I'm going to throw out here is single-page applications, server-side rendering, and static-side generators. These are kind of like the three big areas where decoupling is happening. And a single-page application is essentially, you're building an application, you're building all the HTML, and you're throwing it within Drupal. It's within a page, and it could be on a CDN or standalone someplace. The HTML is JavaScript, everything is being rendered into the browser, and the browser takes over at that point. The browser is talking to your API directly. So all the routing is happening on the front end. And this is kind of like the most common form of decoupling, is you're building these applications that are talking to your Drupal API directly. They're living on your Drupal site. Some of the pros of doing something like this is you can obtain very rich interfaces and complex functionality. You could build all of this in Drupal again, but it becomes a lot easier to build it in a kind of a single-page application fashion, because you're kind of the only thing you're talking to on the back end is the API now. And if that API ever changed, if you modified, if you went to a new module in Drupal, or you did something, you'd always be able to maintain that code that you had on the front end. And the front end also is a lot easier to develop. So that's you'd use it for this is a web form, a public web form that we developed. It collects almost 60 or 70 fields. It goes into the Drupal database, and we have a custom controller built on the back end to receive this. This was done on Drupal 7. We actually brought this from a .NET system, it's probably going to go feed into a Drupal 8 system in the future. And we don't want to keep changing the front end. We've invested a lot of time on this, and it's more efficient for us to this is a good use case for doing something in a decoupled fashion. Another application that we've been working on is a data analysis tool. This is like Excel functionality, almost Excel-like functionality on the front end. And there were a couple of examples shown in some of the decoupling sessions, I think yesterday. But this is kind of similar. Again, it's a single-page application. It's getting all its data from the back end. Drupal does a great job at managing all the data. We have a custom controller that delivers it. And I'll probably, towards the end, I plan to demo this to you, just to show you how much easier it is to do something like this on the front end. Again, we have charting capabilities. You have all, we can slice and dice the data. It almost behaves like Excel in your browser. And you could also achieve something like this with JavaScript to jQuery, but it's a lot harder. This was another application that had a very complex decision trees. It was for a research methods kind of application. It had multiple screens. A lot of the answers you put on any of the screens kind of changed what is going to happen in the next screen. They have a lot of sliders in there, a lot of validation. We went to multiple APIs to get data over here, and then finally it feeds into, it gets its result sets from Drupal, which is through an API. These are really good building functional front ends. Are kind of a really good use case for building single-page applications, we see this happening the most out there, and I think a common mistake, and common gotchas that have happened in the past is you saw this flurry of websites that were coming out there, and they were like these single-page, one long-page applications, and everything was just rendered into one page. It looked really cool. They were all built as spas. They're all built as like single-page applications, and people obviously you get very happy seeing something like that. But when you look at your SEO, it's not so great, and it's not recommended to do something like that. The chances are that your page will not get indexed. So single-page applications, the big gotcha is like it's all client-side routing, because once the HTML and JavaScript is delivered to the browser, everything happens in the browser, and the Googles of the world are not going to pick it up. It's not going to get indexed. So that is that's where you draw the line and say single page is not the way to go if you have a lot of content out there. So we go into the next technique of developing applications like this, and this is again another term I'm going to introduce out here called isomorphic JavaScript. And that is basically using JavaScript on the front end and server side. And there are a lot of frameworks that have come into play that do this now. And the concept out here essentially is, you don't want to start replacing your Drupal templates and everything to do this. It is more architectural. There is more complexity in doing this. But if you had a microsite or a blog or something else that was going to consume this data, then it starts making sense. Then you want to start taking this data from the server side using isomorphic JavaScript. And what the reason you use isomorphic JavaScript is the initial rendering is also done. If you're using React, your whole React template is delivered on there is no kind of load time. It's really fast. And I haven't seen too much of this, but there's a lot of talk about this. We haven't done a lot with this as yet. But we do have some use cases where we have to build microsites that are actually consuming data from an actual Drupal backend, and this would be a great technology for that. At a Google I/O session, they said server side rendering is the way to go. It's Google is like everybody thought that client side JavaScript would get indexed someday, which is it's not going to happen, and they want you to do server side rendering. That's the only way to guarantee that you're going to get good results on accessibility and SEO. So server-side rendering, the architecture kind of looks like this. You have the server, which could be Next.js. There's again now you got to learn a new technology, Node.js on the back end, to really achieve this. And you're introducing also more complexity in your overall architecture. So why take this on unless if there's no need for it? So we don't see too much of this. So server-side rendering is all the routes are kind of like as you make a request to the home page, the blog, or the about page, it always goes back to the server. Those URLs are SEO-friendly URLs. The HTML that's sent back to you is sent back to these. The SEO crawler has all the content in it. And then it also has all the templating for the front end built in and delivered right on the first go itself. So it's really fast. I think you get a lot of benefits. Again, the use cases are limited, but there are good benefits if you can achieve this kind of architecture. I just wanted to introduce this tool called Lighthouse. It's built into your Chrome DevTools, and there's also an extension available. So if you're doing any kind of single-page application or doing server-side rendering, this is a good tool to have out there. It gives you, you can run this. You can run this anytime, and you get great. It'll tell you exactly how you're doing with SEO, how's your accessibility, how your best, a whole bunch of best practices that that you should be doing. If you had a progressive web app. If you had a web manifest and you were bringing down this data, this data had to be available offline. If you had somebody who was taking this application on the field and they didn't have access to the web server, and it's progressive, it'll tell you what are the things you're doing right and wrong, and gives you all kinds of that went live performance. I would check it out. It's most of you will already have this on your machine. If you go to like DevTools and Audit, the Audit tab, it's there, and you can also download the extension. Speak up.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And then the final set of architecture in doing headless, decoupled Drupal is static site generators, and this has become a really popular thing out there. And you can't beat static sites in terms of like security, the speed, and how easy they are to deploy. Again, there's a use case for this, you can't generate all your sites statically. It's not possible because data keeps changing, so there's a certain use case for this, the advantages out here are data aggregation, you're getting server-side rendering, and without actually having a server on the back end. You can take all these files and throw it onto an CDN. You can throw it on an S3 bucket, and suddenly you have a super fast, absolutely scalable site, and you have no architecture in the back end, zero, and you're getting all the benefits because everything is statically hosted out there. So static site generators kind of work. I wanted to mention this one technology that has kind of become one of the forerunners out here is Gatsby. There's a lot of talk about this technology, and this is basically the reason it's getting so popular is it uses a lot of like modern techniques like React and GraphQL, and you're working with the latest tools and technologies out there to generate some static sites. Previously you'd build HTML in Notepad or Visual Studio Code or something like that. I think Notepad's a bad example. And yeah, don't do that. So static site generators are, this is the architecture, how it looks. You're building your site using a build process. In this case, I'm demonstrating Gatsby build out here. It's speaking to my Drupal API, getting all the data it needs, and just building a static manifest and throwing it on a CDN. And basically, at that point, everything the browser is just talking with the static file host. So, let's go. There's John. The other thing about static site generators are, you develop this everything's behind the firewall. So from a security standpoint, also it's great because everything sits outside. You're not going to fail a security scan or get hacked. So it does have those benefits as well. And all your Drupal admin, everything sits behind. Again, the very specific use case out here would be something that you need to generate static. That can be there. It's not going to be that dynamic. And if it was very dynamic data, there are ways to solve that problem through some kind of continuous integration, where you would, every time you publish something on Drupal, you'd have something. All the continuous integration that has become so easily and inexpensively available today. There's so many cloud providers out there that are providing you like Jenkins in the cloud, Netlify, CircleCI, Cloud DevOps. There's so many different services out there. And what they do is every time you publish, the Gatsby build process fires up and kind of builds the static manifest and just throws it out again. So it's available on storage. This is I kind of really like this technique. I'm still trying to find more use cases for it, and always like anything that we're doing new, we're trying to figure out if this doesn't need a server, can we just statically host it, and it will give us a lot of benefits. Of course, using all the capabilities of Drupal on the back end for the content management. This is a great blog article on the Google developers blog. And they it's like 20 pages long and kind of out of the scope of this discussion. But if you want to learn more about server-side rendering and static SSR and rehydration and how React and this is a great. I just put this link out there, and if you have time, you want to read that. We spoke about like these three different technologies on the front end for different types of techniques. But the next part is how do we expose this data? And the traditional way of exposing this data is like you develop a view, you do a REST export, you build your custom controllers, and you have APIs to share this data with exposed filters. And what this really leads to is like every time a client has a need, you're coming back and you're developing a brand new view or you're doing a brand new API for them. and you're expecting that those results will match everybody's needs. The filters that you provide will, the sorting and the conditions and everything will be great, and it's one size fits all, and we never see that happening. What that really leads to is people using your APIs in very different ways that you don't expect them to, and they're kind of making multiple requests to get this data. And this isn't quite the, I don't want to throw this buzzword out there, but this isn't quite API first, right? That whole philosophy of being API first, what does that mean? I think I lost another slide.
Still there.
Is okay. I was going to talk a bit more about API. Okay. Yeah, so I wanted to kind of introduce some modules on the back end that we've been looking at, and these are more Drupal 8 specific, and core REST, which is built-in REST is built into Drupal 8, and then the JSON API module and GraphQL, and they're more as well like relaxed web services, which is kind of like a CouchDB standard, but it's and numerous other options out there. JSON RPC is more like how do you control Drupal from, how do you manage the admin functionality of Drupal, and there's others like Contenta.js and whatnot. But I'm just going to focus on REST, JSON API, and GraphQL. And the reason, as I mentioned again, was like, how do we expose this data in a way, now that we've got the front end, we've got these front end developers who are working on this data, do we have to build a brand new view for everything, every time there's a data request? Or they want to make something which is very custom on the front end, you're going to make that view, feature it, and deploy it, and then it only just does what it's supposed to do. It can't be easily extended. So core REST, of course, is all this module allows for all the concatenativities like nodes, users, taxonomy terms, pretty much everything. All your data can be represented as JSON and queried, and you can also create custom views and then natively export them as REST export. So this is I don't know, it's not very. I think it's not coming out so great out there, but. Yeah, I'm requesting a node out here, node 58. It's a content node, and I also want to publish on my blog. I want to publish some details about the user who actually posted this blog, the article, and also some of the taxonomy terms that are associated with this. If I use something like REST, I'd probably make about 3 calls to get all the data I need. I'd make 2 more calls out there. One call I'm making to get the user information that I need, and the other call I'm making to get taxonomy terms. I could do this with, I could build a custom view and get all this data all in one go, but I don't have that view right now, so I'm using the REST API. So traditional REST is really good for reading and writing data, but it's not really good with getting collections, resource embedding, or sparse field sets. So what resource embedding means is if I wanted those embedded resources, they're not available to me. I'd have to make separate calls for them. Then I want to know 3 fields about that user. I don't want to know everything about all the other information that's being presented in the JSON, or that node has a lot more information that I need, and I just don't need that. So I can specify these are just exactly the 3 fields I need. And then I want to do sorting, filtering. I want to do complex conditions. I want to do and/or conditions. I basically want that API to give me anything I need, and that's the whole API philosophy is you free up your data, and make it all available. Of course, within the controls and bounds of what users have access to. So I'll just go through this. Expose all your data via an API. They should understand the schema easily. It's all discoverable. Get a good description of the schema. They can do all kinds of, they have all kinds of controls to do query collections and control the results that they need. Allow, read, write, update, and it's all through one single endpoint. They don't have to go to different places to keep doing this thing. And I think these are some of the philosophies of, and I think this promise is being kind of met with JSON API and GraphQL. These are kind of technologies out there now, and they're standards. So That's a great thing, right? Now your front-end developers have all this power right with them on the front end. They can design their queries as they need. I'm not going to talk so much about JSON API except for say that it's a standard, and you can pretty much build relationships. You can query entities and relationships and pretty much everything. But it's got this everything is done through the query string. There is a learning curve out here, but it lets you do everything. And it is actually has been around a lot longer than GraphQL, and it's really good with the writing data as well. So if you haven't looked at that, that's definitely, if you're going to be decoupling, this is one module you want to definitely check out. The other one I wanted to mention was GraphQL, and this is kind of like developed by Facebook, and I'm sure a lot of you are already using this. It's a query language that enables queries. So it basically lets you build queries of any sort, and it also limits response bloat. So it's providing the client with a lot more control, and it's also giving you the ability to mutate this data, that's essentially change the data, and it also has a real-time interface. Like you can build subscriptions. So if you have anything that's real-time, and your client side can actually establish a WebSocket connection and get this data and be updated without more refreshes. It's a standard. There's good industry adoption with this. There's Facebook, Yelp, GitHub. They've all exposed their APIs now using this technology with GraphQL. It just makes it a lot more simpler. There are a whole bunch of them. If you just Google, who are the folks who are using GraphQL as their public API, you'll find a ton of folks who are doing that. So it's really good for solving problems like resource embedding, which is retrieving related content in a single request, sparse field sets, things that you only need, collections with sorting and filtering, and very complex filter conditions. I'm just going to show a couple of quick sample queries out here. Yeah, so this is like a GraphQL query that I'm doing. I'm trying to get it's a node query. I'm only getting content type with the value of I want only articles out here. So I just specified it. Kind of starts looking. It's not like SQL, but it's kind of synonymous to something like that. It has here. I'm querying on a user. And I want to find out all the notes that were authored by this user, so I can do that. This is another example. I'm looking for all the taxonomy terms, all the tags that are in my database, and I can do the condition operator out there. If you guys have used like MongoDB and some of these other technologies, the filtering mechanism is very similar to that. I'm going to demo the GraphQL kind of module on Drupal, and it has this Explorer tool where you can start writing these queries and testing them out, and also has a tool called Voyager, which is basically if you're brave enough, you can check this out. But it's like a lot of data out there. But essentially all the data that's available in Drupal gets exposed out here. You can start controlling what you want to expose and what you don't want to expose. This is a really great article by Dries, and he says like again, if you just Google him, he's like kind of he's obviously done a lot of work around this, and a very good resource if you're going to get in the decoupling kind of space and try it out. But he compares these three: REST, JSON API, and GraphQL in terms of request efficiency, API exploration, and schema documentation. How operationally simple is it to install, configure, and also when you're writing data, we do find there's a good need for that as well. So when you're writing data into you're presenting an API where people can feed into your database. These are some other kind of links that I'm just going to leave you with. That are great resources. They're an aggregation of links of if you go for React for Drupal or how to decouple. So with that, I'm actually just going to go into a quick demo. You do end show, right?
Yep.
So I'm just going to go into the Explorer tool out here. I have the GraphQL module installed, and I have a couple of queries out here that we were looking at. I'm trying to get all the nodes out here for articles, and I want to get only the ones that are articles. So I have that condition out there. I want to sort it by the field created in descending order. And I can put all of that in the query condition. I can have pagination, so you have your limits and offsets, and it's going to go in the database and get me all of that. And if you look at the result sets on the right hand side, you have this is an article about vegetables, but it has a tag of lift weights, which doesn't make any sense, but. So yeah, I have tags associated. This is a very small sample that I put together, but just to give you some more examples of how the whole GraphQL schema is available out here. You can start looking at whatever is available in the database. You can do a node query. You can query media files, files in your Drupal system, all kinds of content types that you have and other assets. Users, taxonomies. This is a taxonomy term query. I think we looked at this in the PowerPoint. Goes and gets all my. I'm querying the menu by name, the admin menu. I want to see what are all the links available in the admin menu. And there you get all that information. So you have these queries right now. GraphQL is giving you all that power, and you can have multiple kinds of conditions. You'd have to do this in views otherwise, or build your own custom data controller. Now I'm just going to go into going to demo some. Is it done? Okay, cool. I just have a quick, I just wanted to show you how easy it is to go get this data once you're in the. So this is just like a very basic front-end React app that I put together just to demonstrate this. It uses Apollo Boost and the Apollo provider. So these are kind of modules that are available in React, and it does all the plumbing for you to go get this data from a GraphQL server. So I've just configured my endpoint, my GraphQL endpoint out here, and I've built this one component called Drupal data, and this component is just even less than 10 lines. Most of the lines are actually GraphQL, that same query that I was showing you earlier on. And when I go, execute this, I'm bringing all the data from my database, running that same GraphQL. If I wanted to change the sorting order, I would just go in here and I have it by descending. I'm just going to go ascending, and it's going to reload the page in a different descending order. And so it's all contained. And I have all the control on the client side. Another quick React app that we're putting together is a single-page application, but this is the Excel functionality I was talking to you about. I have all these different ways of looking at this data. I'm kind of currently looking at, if I wanted, I'm just looking at a couple of. So these are. I'm just going to just deselect this and. You can see I have this, complex functionality, and it's actually just I did this in React, and it's about 10 lines of code, literally 10 lines of code, and all the data is coming back from the Drupal website. I'll just show you that real quick. This is essentially it. It's basically this is the component I wrote report, and this is I'm importing the modules out here that I need. The pivot table UI module, table renderer, and I'm also using Plotly, which is a graphing engine. And I'm using this component. I'm passing all the parameters I need, just setting it up, and that's it. It's 10 lines of code, and you have that kind of functionality on the front end. So I know this is not a sales pitch for React, but it definitely sounds like that. But I think with that, I think we can just we're ready to wrap it up. So just to summarize, Drupal as a data platform, you have a great ecosystem to collect and share this data. You have techniques to build your front end. You can have third-party sites consuming your API, and there are also standards now that exist that make this API philosophy come true. So with that, we can open up to questions.
How would you go about serving media files? Do they used to be hosted in Word, like the backend API service?
So yeah, you could. You have in JSON API, you have derivatives. You can go get the file derivative. So Drupal will do that pre-generation for you, and it'll give you the links. And, it's like HAL JSON. You would get those links. And it's the same thing I think you can do with GraphQL.
Okay, but the actual files, the media files, will be posted together in the Drupal site.
Yeah,
It depends on
it depends what you want.
Yeah, you can host it somewhere else, or you can take that information and you can keep it inside. You can keep it inside the Drupal site, or you can have a CDN that has information. But your API would have the link to it in it. Basically, there are a few ways you do it. Depends on how you want to handle it. And
we have a very large site, and we looked into doing completely decoupling, but the problem is, if you do like a Gatsby build, for example,
Right.
it's going to take an hour to build the site.
Mm-hmm.
You've got somewhere around like 35,000 pages. So what are your thoughts on doing not progressive decouple, but like full decouple for portions of your site, but then like in Netlify or Fastly, defining separate backends, and so then having, maybe a portion of it is served directly by Drupal, but lesser used, but like lots of pages.
Right.
And then kind of your more current stuff is also served by Gatsby, VS,
That's the perfect use case, actually. If you can do that separation and get that, that's the best way to do it. Because if you have statistics on these pages are never going to change, or they're not used at all, then if you have that data, then I think you're in a good position to do something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I've been trying to understand the whole concept of decoupled chemistry for a long time, and just what I think I do is just get more confused.
I hope it's not us who've confused you.
Well, in summary, right? If you were to summarize what is decoupled Drupal, what would you say?
What is decoupled Drupal? I would.
C-level explanation.
so the executives can understand. So the question is, what is Decoupled Drupal, and how would you go about
I
it?
think C-level would be scalable, efficient, and whatnot, and all of that. But
So can I say Drupal now becoming in kind of two different parts? The backend is becoming like a SQL server keeping all the data, and then the front end is all the formatting, and with different APIs and stuff, you can bring into the backend, pull the content, and the templating will be some another environment.
that is, exactly.
C-level.
Exactly. So I think you got it right there. Yeah, I think that's what it's leading to. But I think it's also I think if you look at as you start decoupling, you'll find reasons why some content should always stay in Drupal, and why something should move out of there.
Just
And you still have you have your authorization, you have your roles, you have a lot of the security. So there are some challenges around that. So you gotta if it is a purely static site like he was mentioning, there's a good possibility you can do that. Yeah, and that would be, but it's all moving towards that. The industry direction is moving towards and we're seeing this not only just in Drupal. We're seeing this even in .NET and Java and all. Decoupling is a big thing. You don't want to be too closely tied to your JavaScript, JSPs and your ASPs in the back end. You want to break out of that. So I think it's happening everywhere.
I think just to speak to that, one reason we want to decouple is because it's way easier to hire people. Because it's hard to hire Drupal developers, but it's very easy to hire front-end developers. And front-end developers don't even know anything about Drupal if all they're doing is writing in React and interacting with it with GraphQL.
Right.
You totally eliminate that need, and then you can even outsource your Drupal development if you wanted to, because it doesn't matter from the end user.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, it's that whole thing about developer experience. There's a lot more folks out there on the front end side, and things have gotten so much nicer out there. Folks want to stay on that, learn more about that. So we are seeing that imbalance, and I think we see that imbalance too all the time. Yeah.
Any other questions? I think that's it. Oh, wait, there's one.
This may be a simple question. If not, I'll just kind of talk to you. So, let's say I have a big site and I'm getting ready to migrate it from 7 to 8. You had that slide where it was kind of the 3 flavors, so to speak, of Drupal 8. Is the migration path for existing 7 sites, can you migrate what you have? Or is it really, you're going to migrate that back end and then you rebuild the whole front end?
Go for it.
Is there a way to stage this in a way you could go to 8 with very little pain and then...
There are a few companies that are doing exactly what you're suggesting, where they take the site and they have actually I think one of the companies might be here. We're actually looking into doing it ourselves. Essentially what you have is, for Drupal 7, you have all your content, you have all the information, and you create APIs to take that data and you send it out to templates. Or in this case, React, or whatever you're using, or Angular, I like Angular. You send it into that. On Drupal 8, you also have the same thing. You have APIs that take that information and send it out, but the templates are basically all on the front end. It's all just code by Angular, React, whatever you want to use. While you're doing your migration, you can move everything over piece by piece as you see feed from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, and the APIs can still serve the same information. Meanwhile, your template layer never changes. That allows you to essentially say, okay, I'm doing a migration painlessly with little effort, or basically, people on the front end don't really see what's happening, what the migration is happening in the process. The problem with that is that you have to create the templating engine to work the way you want to. So if you have a client that is expected to be able to edit stuff a certain way, you run into problems with that. Because they're like, oh, I want to go edit the site. Well, you can't edit it normal Drupal way because you don't have the little icon to say, hey, you can edit it here. They have to go in the admin, they have to understand what pages they're editing to do it. So you kind of have to set the expectations when you're doing that. So that's generally, it can work. It's just a matter of you have to set expectations, and then you kind of have to also say, okay, we're going to do it over this process. You got to set their project timeline to match that. Did I answer that, or just?
No, yeah. That was simplified down to what I could understand.
All right. Any other questions? Sunil?
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, fine.